Well. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Taylor.
Rosalind. Long time.
Long time.
And Carrie, nice to meet you. I'm Tyler.
Nice to meet you too. Nice to meet you, Tyler.
Clay, I assume you're walking on a treadmill.
I am walking on a
I was
treadmill.
just going to mention that.
I am walking on a treadmill.
That's amazing. Yeah, Carrie, just for context, Clay and Roz and I used to live in the same vicinity, the same neighborhood, and work together on starting a school in that place. And
Oh, how cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
What neighborhood and what town?
it's the neighborhood it's in South Fulton, which is south of Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
in a town called Serenbe, real forward-thinking, artistic, agricultural, um, environmentally friendly, uh, intentional community.
Cool.
Where Clay and I worked on a charter school there, public charter school, grades K through 8. That is
Still
Friday.
run their
Yeah.
still run their school lottery and
Wow,
board minutes and agendas um,
that's awesome.
on my software platform.
Yep, that's awesome. Hey, Carrie, where are you based?
I'm in Chicago.
Awesome. How'd you hear about Forest Online?
I was just trying to think about that right before I logged in. I've been in a million, like over the past few months, in like a million Facebook groups and like Reddit I've been like all over the place, so I'm not sure, but I know I've been Googling a bunch or searching through all the ones that I have listed and like got to the site and started reading and watching videos. And I was like, yes, I absolutely need to learn more about this school. So
Great. Clay and Carrie, are either of y'all's children joining this? It's okay if they're not.
mine's not, mine can't.
Okay. No problem. I say we jump in. Chrissy, you want to start by introducing yourself, and then I can kind of take it from there.
Yes. So again, good evening. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Chrissy, and I'm the head of school for the Forest School Online. So I'm the one that you received emails for the open house today. And yeah, excited to share more about the Forest School Online. I started off as a guide here all the way at the beginning 4 years ago as a middle school guide, and now running the learning and the team efforts here, and really excited to dive in and tell you more about what we do here.
That's great. Thanks, Chrissy. And Chrissy will be able to answer some of the sort of details too about scheduling and timing and what learning looks and feels like for our learners. But it would be great, maybe Clay and Carrie and Roz. Hey, Roz, good to see you. If y'all want to share just a little bit about like what brings you here and maybe the age of your learners, just having that context would be helpful. Carrie, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My daughter is nine and a half. She's in fourth grade, and she was at a Montessori school for first through third grade. And during third grade, she just started to not be like the best fit for her. Like she was like scoring really high on everything, but was just like, this is not like learning of I felt like she kept hitting roadblocks where she didn't need them. And then went to a Waldorf school very briefly. And then I thought, I think it's time for us to try something completely different. Yeah, so I started looking into other options, and I'm a graphic designer and I run my own business. So I work from home already, and I'm already like a creative person and I enjoy a good problem to solve. So I thought, okay, let's get creative. Let's go for it. Like let's make life as rich as it can for you. As childhood is fleeting, so I want it to be as beautiful as possible for her. So
Awesome. That's great. And what part of Chicago are y'all?
we're near Andersonville or Lincoln Square, so like north side. If I don't know how well you know Chicago, but yeah.
I went to grad school there for like 5 years
Oh, cool.
but didn't spend much time there. but a cool city.
Where were you in grad school?
I was at a school of theology called Moody Bible Institute, which was off
Oh, yeah, yeah,
North,
yeah. I
Northwest
know exactly
California.
where it is. I grew up right near there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cabrini Green, or the project's right there, and
Sure
just
do.
the red part of the city.
Yeah, I grew up with a cat named Cabrini. So yes.
Wow. Thanks for being here and for exploring this with us. Clay and Roz, long time. What in the world brings you guys to exploring an online school, and would love to hear context.
Well, our son Milo he just turned 10, which seems crazy to think about considering
Yeah,
Linus and Felix carpooled together in kindergarten and first grade.
yeah,
Um, but uh, but earlier this year, Milo's in a public school in North Charleston, and he came to me one day and was just like, "Hey, Dad, I think I need to go to a different school. Um, like it's not challenging enough for me." Like just what he said. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And like, this part of me was like, "Who says this?" Like what? Um, and then he uh, sprained his ankle, which meant that he couldn't go on a field trip. Um, and
huh,
so in order to not go on so the teachers didn't know what to do with him, so they put him in a fifth grade class while the rest of the fourth grade went. And he was like, "Dad, um, I really think I need to go to a different school because I spent all day in the fifth grade and I feel like I already know what they're doing too." And like I'll bring him home and do the Khan Academy and all that stuff with him, and he just runs after it and goes
yeah,
and chases after it. And you know, I think he's at the age where, like, one, I don't want the public school system to potentially destroy that, or um, and I'm not saying that they necessarily have to, but like, it's if I don't spend a lot of time, if Roz and I don't spend a lot of time nurturing that, then like it could be problematic. And then you know, the other part is um, how do we embrace it, and how do we um, help him avoid the idea of benchmarking himself um,
yeah.
to um, so those are the things. I mean, we're exploring this school. We're exploring some other schools that are in the Charleston area, and
Yeah,
you know, that's where we're at.
that's great. Anything you want to add, Roz?
Not really. Since you started the school, but under some like occasional discussion of like, oh, that looks interesting. Um, I'll be totally honest. I've a lot of questions about the virtual aspect, so I'm
Yeah,
curious to learn more.
absolutely. We'll be real with you guys and let you know like why families come here to Forest Online, what it's like, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. Chrissy's somebody, as long as I've known Chrissy, she believes in deeply the promise of online education and really, you know, orchestrating it for all that it's worth. And so, and like anything, things have limits, and so we'll be honest about those. Um, but it's great to hear that context. I think I think the plan is I'll begin our time together by giving you a high level view of our organization and philosophy, and then turn it over to Chrissy for some of the details about scheduling and opportunities and challenges. Does that sound okay for y'all? Great. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see this picture that says open house? Awesome. So this is my family. My kids I have four children. River is our oldest. She's 19 now. and I have three boys. River's with her boyfriend there. And then I am engaged to be married, and I'm getting married in 6 days, actually, in Charleston. There's in Johns Island.
That's
So
wild. Congrats.
yeah, so her name is Summer Fitz,
Congrats.
and she's from, thank you, she's from Paradise Island, which is right outside of Mount Pleasant. So we're getting married in Johns Island
Oh,
at the Island House, which is pretty fun. Yeah. Um, so I'm the CEO of our organization, which includes really three entities. So we have the Forest School and Acton Academy, which is an in-person school with the same mission, and it's ages 3 through 17, so pre-K 3 through grade 12. We have the Forest School Online, which we launched during COVID because we discovered at that time the promise of a sort of self-directed online virtual program. And then we also got in touch with families who, really valued having flexibility and freedom, frankly, to earn a US accredited high school degree, over their child's education and just have the sort of freedom and flexibility, that an online education can provide them. And so we have, two separate teams, staff at the Forest School in person, at the Forest School online. They collaborate. Our in-person school is a part of an international network of, micro schools called Acton Academy. And then our online school is not an Acton, but draws heavily. I mean, we have the same mission, promises to families and core values, and our staff collaborate tremendously. And then, but we both have very small schools. In person it's 162. Christy, what are we at right now online?
we are at 43
40,
currently.
43 online. So everybody knows everybody, and we're not going to get much bigger. We'll grow the online school a little bit, but it's still going to be a pretty tight knit community. And our version of scale is through our institute, which is where we do research and consulting and leadership training. We've launched a lot of schools where kids have a lot of freedom, flexibility, and are driving their learning. And I think if I were to think about our staff are really good at getting kids to own their learning, challenging kids, helping them customize their learning journeys, helping them make school fit them rather than the other way around. Our staff are good at knowing what deep learning looks and feels like. Our staff are not traditional teachers in the sense that they're delivering content. They're guides. They're Socratic in nature. And then our learners use a lot of e-learning platforms. And then our guides, our staff design a lot of great challenges for kids, very hands-on, project-based learning, and a lot of storytelling. Our headquarters are right next to, it's North America's largest movie studios, Trilith Studios, and so we frame English language arts as storytelling. We believe story is relevant in, not just film, TV, dance, theater, but also business, real estate, branding, mood boards, marketing, what have you. We want every graduate of our schools to be great storytellers, and of course, story really captivates young people. In fact, if we had learners on the call tonight, I was going to start with some stories, but since we're jumping, not that the stories wouldn't captivate y'all, but I'm just going to jump into the nuts and bolts. So that's our organization. We have three parts. We're a nonprofit 501c3. But we want to run a sustainable business. And then I teach at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm an academic director there and teach AI and project-based learning and new school models design labs. And then I teach at Harvard on um, deeper learning and on systems level leadership in the education sector. For a time, I worked at a national nonprofit called Transcend, which is in the bottom left, and I would say it's sort of our nation's premier research and development education firm, and had a chance to design a lot of different school environments, public and private. You can see Chad Hill's charter there in the middle, and I've just seen a lot of stuff. And in many ways, like what we're doing at Forest is, it's trying to steal the best of what's around, and really push the conversation forward in education. This is our team broadly. And Christy and I are just representing this group here on the call. And it's really a fantastic team of caring folks who want to rear great children. One of the things people rave about the schools, is the caring folks. Chrissy's got some really great staff on her team that do a good job engaging the kids. And we really are trying to build the future of learning, online and in person. And when you think about different industries over the last 100 years and how they've evolved, medicine is a great example of the changes that have occurred over 100 years. Obviously, communication, and work is another example. But when you look at schools 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and really, you know, in Chicago, in Charleston, in Atlanta, where we are, they still look pretty much the same. And I even asked my teenage daughter at one point, how many features of school can you find across these time periods? And her response was, uh, sort of a sigh, because the jury is not out. The jury is in. The jury is back about the traditional teacher-led industrial age model of schooling. The longer kids are in it, the more bored they become and the less relevant that they feel learning is. I mean, Carrie, you sort of hearken to, I don't want to kill the spirit. You know what I mean? I want to nurture that creativity. It is hard to do that in the industrial age model of schooling because you think about kids who are in this model and they're having to listen to answers of questions that they didn't ask, and they're having to follow rules they didn't make for 12 years. What does that do to their spirit? What does it do to their mind? What does it do to their creativity? Um, and so we want to design schools really to see a leap in motivation and outcomes that students deserve. So when we think about this, we're not trying to improve upon the traditional industrial age model of schooling. We're trying to do something completely different. And I would say families who enjoy Forest online and enjoy Forest in person, they believe that too. Like they're excited about doing something totally different. If they're just wanting a little bit better, than what's down the road, this is not the environment, for that, because this is designed to do something different. Our mission is about purpose finding. Online, we're asking kids all the time different versions of this question. What's inside of you that's not yet in the world? What are you learning? What are your goals? If you could learn anything in the world, what do you want to learn and why? And how can you use your learning to help other people? Organizationally by the numbers, I've already mentioned, some of the numbers. 50 over 50% of folks at Forest Online are scholarshiped. We there's 4 full-time dedicated staff to Forest Online, and then about 4 other team members from our organization devote part of their, including myself, devote part of their work hour every week to the Forest School Online. We're headquartered in Trillith in South Atlanta, and we just built a new building. We did a capital raise, and our kids designed the building, and we're in there. And the reason I say that is because the Forest School Online is invited to come to Atlanta and rub shoulders with the Forest School in person a couple times a year, especially commencement, which is our end of, and it's called studio advancement and commencement. So it's where learners kind of graduate from their studio. Studio is our word for classroom. And we have graduation. We've graduated a number of kids from the Forest School Online already, and it's super fun. And we've had learners from the Forest School Online come to the Forest School in person for a session, or for a week. We've had learners from the Forest School in person go to the Forest School Online for a session or two, and there's a real nice synergy between the two organizations. We really like that, and a few key features of our learning approach is, I mentioned, we have guides, not teachers. The studios are mixed age.
Is that a
So
Kiefer right there?
that is JCK Kiefer. That's right.
JCK Kiefer.
Yep. Yeah, Carrie Clay knows the learner on the right there. So like in the at the Forest School Online, Chrissy, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically our upper elementary and middle schoolers are together in a studio. Our high schoolers are together in a studio. And then for our transatlantic sort of Asia, Oceania studio, middle and high school are together. And Chrissy's going to talk a little about those time differences, but we just find that peer-to-peer learning is profound. We don't have grades, and instead we have badges, so it's mastery based. So kids at our school want to earn badges, and basically that means mastering a certain subset of skills and knowledge. The kids make the rules for their studio, and we oversee that process so that they're making rules and learning how to make rules worth following, which is a crucial skill we feel like for our nation. There's no homework. Um, Number 8 is the learning is self-paced, so learners can go as fast or as slow as they want, and we have learners that do both ways. We have a number of instances where kids have finished their studio early by a year. We've had 3 people graduate from our high school in 3 years, because they were just like, crushing it and wanted to go fast. And then we have some folks who go slow, including one of my own. And it's not about it's about what we ask the learners, y'all, is like, what are your goals? And of course, are you talking with your parents about those? But like, what are your goals? And then how are you doing against your goals? And we're going to honor the goals they set for themselves, and we're going to hold them accountable for the goals that they set for themselves. Number 9, travel is obviously encouraged. A number of our online families are on the road. Y'all had online families fall in love with Forest Online and then move to Georgia and come to the Forest School Acting Academy. I mean, I think of three families that we have right now in that category. We even have one family who has a learner at Forest Online and some folks in person because they do like crazy sports, gymnastics, and it just works out great for their schedule. Apprenticeships begin immediately at the Forest School Online. So every middle schooler is guided to procure for themselves a 40-hour apprenticeship with a high-performing professional in a field that they're interested in. And then they do that once a year. And then when you're in high school, you do 4 a year. So if you're with us middle and high, you will have done over 20 apprenticeships by the time you graduate from our high school. And the real world learning that happens there, as you would imagine, is fantastic. We believe learning is better in a diverse environment. So we are trying to maximize economic, racial diversity, age, gender, school background, religion, and learning differences. And it's amazing. I mean, the international component of our school and just the different cultures represented is in and of itself an unbelievable learning. Chrissy, you want to tell them where you're based, Chrissy?
Yeah, so my family and I live in Thailand full time, just bought a house here. So we are living the international aspect of our school and love that, we can have our adventures and still work and do what I'm passionate about while we meet our family goals as well. So it's amazing.
And Chrissy, our online staff state-wise, they're in, correct me if I'm wrong, Kansas, Illinois, uh, Arizona, and Georgia. Is that right?
Uh, Missouri, not Kansas, but yes.
Missouri. Not Kansas. Yep. Got
Yes.
it.
Yep.
So it's a very, very cool, mix of folks. This is our portrait of a graduate. Parents of Forrest and I, 7 years ago when we started, came up with this. We said, when kids are 18, what do we want to be true of them? This was our answer. So the learning experiences that our kids encounter even online, they're designed to give kids practice at these things. Learning to be are social and emotional factors. Learning to do are like key marketplace skills like design thinking, entrepreneurship. Like you can't graduate from Forest unless you know what passive income is or how to build a minimum viable product. Learning to learn is not just traditional academics, but it's also learning science. We want kids to be able to design independent studies for themselves, and then learning to live together. How do you collaborate? How do you build trust? How do you build empathy? Um, and people ask me all the time, like, will my kid fit at the Forest School Online? And I don't have an answer for that, honestly. What I do have an answer for is like confidently, if kids come to Forest Online, I know that they're going to get better at these things. Like they're going to get practice at doing these things. And if this is something that you as a parent care about, these will be cultivated at the Forest School Online. Um, you know, a few interesting things about the school. Once a day, sometimes twice a day, there's a Socratic discussion where a guide will pop on Zoom, tell a story, and then pose a question that has no clear right or wrong answer. And the kids debate it, and they hear different perspectives. They are invited to change their thinking. And that's an awesome experience. And that happens daily. There's check-ins, one-on-one check-ins with the staff. And those check-ins, it's all about their goals. Hey, what are your goals? How are you doing? How's it going? And trying to work up those. Number 8, deep books. That's basically our way of saying kids get to choose what they want to read. And we oversee the process of them choosing, but they get to choose what they want to read for school credit. And then number 13, I'll just mention, we have something called Dream Team. So we guide every learner at the Forest School Online to build a dream team. So what that means is we would guide them to think about who are some caring adults in their lives that love them, that are awesome, that are different from one another, and that will be willing to meet with them 3 or 4 times a year. So it might be like your kid's coach. It'll definitely be the parents. It'll also be like coach, maybe a pastor or a rabbi or imam. It might be a neighbor or a family friend, might be a mentor. And they meet with them 3 or 4 times a year, and the learner leads the meeting. And in that meeting, they just kind of share their goals and dreams. And then they get feedback from the dream team. And the dream team, gives them inspiration, gives them support, gives them accountability, makes some connections for them. If you did a meeting like that 3 times a year with champions in your life, what do you think would happen to you? This is what we want to do with young people. So that's an example of a signature learning experience that we have, at the school. In terms of why folks come to us, I've definitely had a number of Black and brown families tell me outright that the reason they like Forest and Forest Online is because the self-directed learning, the freedom in learning, is empowering their kids to think for themselves. I think a second reason is just freedom and flexibility. That's probably the biggest reason folks at Forest Online come, just to have that flexibility. 3 is flourishing. It's really fascinating. In 2025, in K-12 education, schools can now be set up, and should be set up, in my opinion, such that learners can study anything in the world that they want. And what our staff is expert at is knowing what deep learning looks and feels like. So it's not us imparting knowledge to every learner at the Forest School Online. It's us managing the quality of learning through multiple channels, because everybody's working on something different for the most part, with the exception of group projects. And so in that context, you can really flourish. I mean, learners can really study anything in the world that they want. So we have learners making their own badges. Like examples are pilot's license. We have like 4 learners who've got a pilot's license, and that counts as school credit. Stock trading, coding, soccer, acting. I mean, these are all things the kids came up with, and they get school credit for it. And then it ends up being deep learning. It's like a robust independent study. Career prep is another reason why folks come to us, because, if the world of work in 2025 and beyond is in fact often a gig economy requiring a lot of self-starting and entrepreneurship, what better way than to practice that from the early ages? And then affordability is another reason why folks, come to our school. I will say though, it ain't perfect. Some common struggles of parents, letting go, letting their kids make poor decisions and learn and experience the natural consequences of those decisions. Is we think incredibly valuable and one of the best teachers, but some parents struggle letting go. The self-pacing can be a struggle for parents if learners choose not to go fast, but they choose to go slow, that could be a struggle. Our school uses a lot of different lingo on purpose, because we want to get kids out of like the traditional school mindset. So we use these terms like studio and guide, and hero's journey. And it just takes like a year to get through that. It's sort of annoying at first for parents. Um, Learner self-governance, they make the rules and they govern themselves. That could be a challenge for parents. I think some parents have in mind a very firm destination for their kids by the age of 18 and 19. And if that's the case, all respect. And that's challenging. I think parents struggle with that at the school because, again, we're all about helping kids find their calling. which may be exactly what's in the mind and brain of their parents, but it might not be. Again, we're not going to come between a family and their kids, but like the questions we're asking kids really are about what's inside of them. And then tracking progress. And Clay, I know you work in tech, you'd be interested to know this is a Christmas nightmare. And this problem is relevant to not just our school, but many different online and other micro schools around the world right now, because you have kids. Imagine your child working on 4 different online platforms that are all great, as well as like 5 different things at the school. There is no dashboard for that. And there are massive barriers. Actually, some of the e-learning platforms that they're working on will not share their API. And so there's no customizable dashboard. So, I have 4 children. 3 of my boys are at the school now. If I wanted to find out where one of my sons, how they're doing right now, it would take me like 2 or 3 hours to figure it out. And I know what I'm looking at. So for a parent who is new and doesn't know what they're looking at, it takes a long time and it is frustrating. And I'm just telling you, I mean, there is no tech solution for this right now. I've been working on this problem for the last like half year, seeing who's working on it, who's interested in it, whether there's funding. And it will eventually be, but it's going to be some years down the road. But it's just a struggle, parents, is like tracking progress. So there honestly is a component of trusting the process, in coming to the Forest School Online, where you're like, all right, I know learning is happening, even though it's hard to track. I will say the old school progress reports, Algebra 2, 86, B 3.0, I mean, are almost worthless at this point. Most kids in the United States make A's and B's. There's such an incredibly documented grade inflation, and even college admissions officers look at traditional transcripts and say, what does this even mean? We don't even know. And so we use a mastery-based transcript for our high schoolers, and it really helps the college admissions officers and employers really get to know the kid. Um, so it's pretty cool. Let me pause for a moment. Any questions so far?
I probably still have a lot of questions, but it's about the virtual part. So I'm also curious, just kind of like go through the spiel and hear more about how that works and parent involvement, what the expectations are there.
Yep. Makes total sense. Well, that's probably a nice segue. Chrissy, do you want to take over and sort of walk through your slides and kind of get into the heart of Roz's questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. And feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question that pertains to a specific slide. But we'll have some time at the end too for just any questions as well. So I know Tyler mentioned that one of the reasons that families join us at Forest Online is for flexibility. And we've tried to honor that in as many ways as we can and get really intentional. So one of the ways that we do that is we have our studios set up in 2 different time zones. So in kind of the US-based time zone, which runs in Eastern time, we have a separate middle school studio and a high school studio. So again, middle school actually starts at 5th grade, 4th grade on special occasion, if we have a learner that we feel is up to that challenge, through 8th grade, and then high school is 9th through 12th. So those run from about 10:30 to 1:30 Eastern time each day, and I'll show that schedule broken down a little bit more in just a minute. But we also offer an Asia Oceania studio, which is based in Indo-China time, which is where I'm at. So we have learners in that studio in Asia, but also in Africa and also in the United States. So we have even as young as middle school learners who their daily flow it makes more sense for them to learn at night. And so they log on to our Asia studio at nighttime in the US. So that runs morning time in Thailand and nighttime in the US. And that is actually, I think Tyler mentioned this is actually a mix of middle and high school learners. And it was a really, really fun experiment, to be honest, starting this and figuring out how do we make a 5th grader and a 12th grader, be learning deeply at the same time. And it's gone amazingly well. The studio is incredible, and the learners are thriving in that environment. So we're really excited about that. And with that, if learners are traveling throughout the year, they're able to actually flow between studios on a session by session basis. Um, so we've had learners travel to Paris, South America, all kinds of different places with their family, and actually move to a different studio for a session to accommodate their time zone. And here's a more specific breakdown of what the kind of daily flow looks like in both studios. So since you guys are in the US, I'll kind of stay on this side for now. But essentially, each morning, the learners have independent flex time. So depending on the time zone, we have some learners who wake up and get started on some work. Maybe they want to hit math first thing in the morning while they're feeling fresh. Maybe some like to start off with some reading. And then all of our learners hop on Zoom starting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. And that's for what we call opening launch. And that's a Socratic discussion, which Tyler mentioned, which is where the guides throw out story and pose like, hey, here's two scenarios. Like, which one would you do, A or B? And they have to kind of grapple with that, choose a side, and then like be able to articulate why that one resonates with them. And after that, they meet with their running partners, which are essentially accountability partners. If you're going out for a run in the morning, it's easier to do it with folks who also want to wake up early and run with you. It makes you get out there. So our learners have these buddies that they check in with every day. They can share their goals. They can ask them to look over their work and give feedback on it. So they do that at 11 a.m. every day. And then once a week, their whole running partner team will also meet with the guide for a guide check-in. And that's really just to share their goals for the week, their progress that they've made from the past week, chat through any kind of customizations for their badge plan, any sticky areas that they just need, excuse me, a thought partner for to kind of get through. And then at 11:45 to about 1:15 p.m., that's when we have our signature learning experience for that day. So some days that's Quest, some days that's our story arts, other days it's civilization. And we also run alternating math and writing workshops on Fridays each week. So that's really where they get into the super deep learning, project-based learning. They're doing collaborative work together as a team with real world roles that they take on and kind of piece together amongst their team. So that's a great time for the learners to really collaborate and get feedback and build that sense of community with one another. And then really after 1:15, again, is just flex time. So they're not necessarily done for the day. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, depends on their time zone. But that's when they're able to go out and do their apprenticeships with a mentor, or maybe they go out and do community service for their servant lead badge, or cuddle up on the couch and read their deep book. So it's really a flexible schedule outside of that synchronous time for families to build the day in a way that makes sense for them and their schedules and commitments like gymnastics or soccer. We have many learners who do a lot of sports or even we've had learners do acting, and they have a work schedule already in middle school. So they're able to really build their schedule out based on their family's unique flow. So I love to kind of just highlight a couple of our actual learners that we have online and share how they take their passion and their calling, how they want to change the world and really make their badge plan unique to them. So we have this badge plan. It's like a framework, right, that every learner will need to advance from middle school to high school or high school out to graduation. But how they accomplish that badge plan can look completely different for each learner, which is amazing. So this is Kiki. She lives in Kenya. She's actually in our Asia Oceania studio, but she's in middle school. And Kiki is super passionate about fashion, but really just any design. Give that girl like a color scheme and she will go to town. So what that's looked like for her is some of her deep books, not all of them, have been about fashion or design. I know she did one on the history of fashion. She read another that was kind of like how to start your own fashion line meant for like teenagers. So those are some ways that she's kind of taken her reading and made it more personal to her. Her apprenticeship that she did was actually with a pretty high profile fashion designer in Nairobi, Kenya, and got to learn from her what it's like to be in the industry and do real work in that. For her elective credit, she took a sewing class each week. She actually entered one of her designs into a national contest. It was beautiful. And then even for our more group-based quest and story arts, she has taken some of the challenges and the projects within those on a certain topic, but then kind of tweaked them to her interests. So an example of that would be 1 year in story arts, our learners created podcasts. And they got to choose any topic that interested them or that they felt like they wanted to share something with the world about. So Kiki talked about fashion in her podcast. And so she was able to learn those creative storytelling skills, but still personalize it, to what she's trying to achieve. So that's one of our learners. Another one is Marcos, and he's in the US. He's in our high school studio, actually one of our seniors set to graduate this year. And Marcos is really passionate about aviation. He's one of the ones Tyler mentioned who has pursued a pilot's license. He's also been exploring aeronautics, things like that. So again, some of his deep books have been related to aviation history. Some of them have been memoirs of pilots that he was interested in learning about their life and how they got there. One of his apprenticeships was, again, earning his pilot license with an experienced flight instructor and getting closer to that milestone. And then for some of his science credits for his high school badge plan, he really catered them instead of just taking biology or chemistry or physics, which he still has experienced through our science-based quests. He tailored his sciences more to aviation sciences. So he took intro to aviation science. He did physics through Embry-Riddle dual enrollment. So really taking more of those advanced science credits to get him into a program in a college that is applicable to what he wants to do. So one of our pillars at both the Forest and Forest School Online is social capital. And that's really just helping guide our learners to build their own personal networks. I know one lesson I've learned as an adult is that who you know can really make or break your success sometimes. The connections that you're able to build and who you're networked with. And so we really try to help our learners to build their social capital, even in 5th grade. So there's a lot of ways we do that. Part of it happens within our school kind of community with just collaboration with peers, even in their studio, but also out of their studio, maybe in a higher studio. Mentorship and coaching from their guides who all come from different backgrounds and diversities. Leadership training with me. Some of our learners are mentoring in school leadership or marketing. And then also through apprenticeships and their servant leader experiences that they do. So they're getting to connect with different people in their communities and different experts in fields. Their dream teams is another way, as Tyler mentioned. Our learners build their dream teams with people that offer different things. So they're able to ask questions and say, hey, who do you know? What feedback based on your experience do you have for me in this situation? Or, hey, I'm really stuck here. What advice can you offer to me? So their dream teams are giving them feedback at our exhibitions each session on their projects that they do. They're meeting with them for their goal setting meetings twice a year. They're just being cheerleaders for them throughout the year and their goals and calling saying, hey, how's it going? I haven't talked to you since August, but what can I help you with? And then again, just who they know, offering their networks to the learners as well. And then the third area, and there's probably more than these three, but are experts. So both schools invite industry experts into the studios multiple times each session, usually for Quest, but sometimes for story arts or civilization as well. And those experts share their wisdom and expertise. They give real-time feedback on the projects that the learners are working on. So I'll give you examples in a minute of what that looks like. We also ask the learners to initiate contact with experts. So if a learner is designing a course for their learner designed course on a particular topic and they need an expert's feedback, we ask them to do some research and find a good contact to reach out to and just ask questions and pick their brain. And then we also offer experts in college and career workshops. So admissions experts giving them feedback on their applications and what they could make stronger. So here's a few examples of different guest experts that we've had in online. This is our very short list out of a very long list. But you can see it's a wide variety of industries that learners have been able to kind of do projects on and gain experience from. The screenshot there you'll see we had a quest in our high school studio last year that was all about photography. And so the learners were taking photographs and editing them and creating their own galleries. And we had 3 professional photographers that came in and looked at their galleries and gave them feedback on what was great about their photos and what could use some work. And they were able to talk through, different strategies and editing techniques as well. And then another big piece for us is character education. And online, we try to weave that in pretty much throughout our whole program, wherever we can, as much as we can. We want our learners to not only be successful and well educated, but also great people, as I'm sure as parents, you guys also want for your kids. So there's a couple ways that we do that. One of them is through 360 feedback. This is a big part of our model, where each session, learners are given feedback by their peers on these 3 things: collaboration, empathy, and trust. And so throughout the year, they'll get 7 sets of feedback on these 3 areas, and they can look at their data over time and learn how to make sense of that. And what does this mean about how I'm showing up in my studio? How can I use this data to collaborate better with my peers? How can I show more empathy to others? And how can I build trust and make sure that the other learners in the studio know that I'm trustworthy and will do what I say that I'm going to do? So our learners do this, and this is a great practice for careers where different jobs use similar feedback structures. So they're learning how to give feedback and also receive feedback in a way that is helpful and kind and specific to help them grow themselves and help others grow as well. Another big way we do this is through Socratic discussions. So these discussions are fantastic for taking learners into a situation or a scenario and really making them think through the pros and cons of something. So we found that this helps our learners build empathy for others. It helps them to do some perspective taking and really separate themselves from their own kind of perspective and think about others and how others' perspectives might influence something or how others' backgrounds might change the way that they think. It really helps them to articulate their opinions or their feelings about something and be able to explain that to others in a really profound way. And a big one for us is it helps learners to disagree respectfully. So I don't know if any of you guys are on social media, but it can be a scary place out there seeing how adults disagree with each other. So our goal is that our learners can graduate and have tough discussions and do it respectfully and do it in a way where they can have a nice conversation with someone that they don't agree with. And that's a great thing. And then lastly, we just try to make an incredibly safe environment for our learners to practice discussing tough topics where they know that they are free and welcome to authentically bring their own voice to the conversation without shame or judgment, and that they're able to share that and know that their peers in the studio will offer respect and empathy to them. So that brings me to kind of the end of my section. And yeah, I'd love to just open it up for any questions that you still might have about more of the online logistics and how it might look for your particular learner.
I have a question about, thank you so much, Chrissy. That was awesome. I have a question about the way that the school year is set up. So like, when does school start? When does it end? When is graduation? Like, how does that flow? Because I know different parts of the world use different schedules and flows. So I'd love to know more about that.
Great question. Oh, Tyler's already on it. He's already ready to share. Yeah, so
go ahead. You can explain it, Chrissy. Go for it.
Yeah, we typically start pretty much right at the beginning of August. It varies by a couple days each year. And we typically end right at the end of May or very early June. And what that looks like is we split the year into 7 sessions. Most of our sessions are between 4 to 6 weeks. We have a couple that are a little longer, a couple that are a little shorter. And then between each session, our learners and guides have a week off. So they work really hard and really power through on their signature learning experiences, their badge plans, and then they have a week to rest and just refresh. So we still do 180 calendar days of school, but it's split up really nicely in a way that helps our learners focus deeply while they're here, and then again, kind of have a break. So yeah, I would say early August, end of May is the average for most of those years. They still get their, long summer for June and August, or sorry, June and July, and then they still get their 2 week break in December. But then they also have all of those 1 week breaks throughout where families travel and just enjoy. Great question. Yeah, Roz.
Thanks. I have a few.
Okay.
I'll start with one. Is during the day, can you speak to to what extent parents need to be there? Like, is it more like a homeschool situation, or is it like they're on their own from X to Y?
Yeah. So from our experience, I really believe that answer depends on the learner. We have some learners who do great being in their room, door shut, and they're just honed in. We have other learners who really need to be maybe, in an open plan living room work area while the parents working and doing their thing, and they kind of can hear what's going on and offer support as needed. So it really depends on the learner and how motivated they are, how much attention they can kind of sustain at a given time. Um, so yeah, I would say, you know, with self-directed learning, some parents have taken the approach where they're completely hands off, and we don't necessarily see that being a learner who is successful. So most learners still need a lot of parent support, check-ins with their parents, some weekly, some daily, and just being like, "Hey, what'd you do today? Great, can you show me? What feedback did you get, on your project that you were working on in civilization? What did the other learners have to say? What revisions did you make on that?" So it's a lot of question asking, just like what our guides do in the studio. Um, but what we've seen is that the more involved the parent is in terms of checking in regularly, typically the more successful the learner will be because they have that accountability at home. So it's not necessarily hand holding or telling your learner what to do, but it's really just letting them know you're there as a support and asking those questions. Yep, so Tyler threw in the chat, we asked parents to check in minimum once a week. But again, we've seen more success for learners achieving their goals when parents check in more often than that.
Yeah.
Tyler, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would just say twice. Monday, what are your goals for the week? Friday, how did it go?
Okay. So it's there's enough content there and they know what they're doing that if they're reasonably self-motivated, then the
Yeah.
check-ins can be on the parent schedule.
Yep,
Is that
absolutely. And
So
the
it
big
sounds like this isn't COVID, like where, hey, we're not doing school, but we're kind of going to do school. But hey, parents, you're going to have to educate your kids for the next year.
no, no,
This
no.
is
They're learning a lot on e-learning platforms for sure, which the AI infused e-learning platforms. And I think the whole thing is founded upon the notion of a badge plan. So like upon entering the school, a learner and their family will take a look at a version 1.0 badge plan that the school presents to them. And a badge just again, represents the skills and knowledge that we want them to master. But the family can and the learner can say, "Oh, I like this," or "I want to add, subtract, or change something." And then Chrissy and I basically and our team will help you think through the trade-offs, of that change from our vantage point. But then ultimately, y'all would decide, and then they would go at that. And so they're in their minds, they're like, I want to earn these badges, and that's the thing that they're working to. And there's plenty of work to do, but again, they can go as fast or as slow as they like. And we sort of pose the question, all right, what's your timeline for mastering these badges and what are you going to work on today? What are you going to work on tomorrow? How's it going? And then the reason it's so important for parents to at least do Monday, Friday is just to be aware, so there's no surprises of, oh, well, they're way ahead or they're exactly on track for what they set for themselves or they're way behind or whatever it is.
Yeah, my question isn't really so much about like checking in with them. It's more about can you work from home functionally uninterrupted when you need to and have meetings and that kind of stuff and not like pop out and find out they've just been sitting on their hands because they got stuck with something, you know?
Yeah. I would say the majority of our learners are able to do that. Again, you know your child best, but they know what they've set for themselves for the day and for the week.
Okay.
So if they are not actively working on that, then they will have the natural consequences of that. And when they're checking in with you at the end of the week and with their guide, they have to be transparent about what they did or didn't do. And then the
Mhm.
guide asks questions, the other learners ask questions. Well, hey, I've noticed for 3 weeks you've had the same math goal. I heard this week from a learner. And they're like, well, what's going on with that? Like, when is this the week that you're going to do what you said you're going to do in math? So they hold each other to the fire with that. There's definitely
Good.
some peer accountability there. And also their guides are asking those questions like, what are you stuck with? Like, what's prevented you from doing that? So again, most of our learners with that accountability in the studio, the accountability knowing they're going to be telling you what they did as well. Most of them are able to manage really well in a self-directed way. We've had some that don't, and they take advantage, but the majority of them do really well.
Okay. So I have a couple other questions. I would normally like be less greedy about the questions, but I'm also keeping an eye on getting kids to bed. I think one big question I have is about the self-directed aspect where like there is one aspect of parenting or mentoring like kids that they don't always choose, they don't always know like the things that they could choose, right? So what about exposing kids to things that they wouldn't choose on their own? Like at 10, you don't know all the things and you're gonna come with some biases. Like I'm thinking about where Milo's in school right now. Like he definitely wouldn't have said, I wanna, dance and sing and do these 9 other arts things. But I, as a parent, feel it's good to expose them to those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that our team is really good at is as we're building a curriculum map for the year for our quests. What are our quests going to be this year? What are our story arts going to be? What are our civilizations? We're definitely connected to what the learners are interested in. We ask for their input, like, what do you want to learn next year? So that's a piece of it. But we're also looking at diversity of learning in terms of we do want them to be well-rounded. So um, I think it was a story arts. This was probably a few years ago that was dance. And some of the learners, they were like, I don't want to do this. And by the end of the session, they're like, you know what? I still am never going to pursue dance, but it was actually really cool to experience that. So, there are some quests or story arts or civilizations that a learner might not connect with or might not be within their wheelhouse. And it might be challenging for them. But we always ask them to just give it a try and say, like, if you decide you never want to do this skill again in your life, that's okay. But you can say that you've tried it and that XYZ skills. So they're able to still kind of get some experiences that they wouldn't. Yep, as Tyler mentioned, they're getting experience in a lot of different industries through apprenticeships. Um, did you want to say more about that, Tyler?
Just that in order for them to get badge credit for apprenticeships, they have to prove that they've done some that they love and are interested in, as well as stuff that they're not interested in. And then for each quest or project, there's often experts kind of parachuting in to those calls, and learners get experience to their expertise as well.
Um, I have another question, but someone else wants to go.
Clay, you want
Hey,
to drop yours
Liz.
in there?
Oh, sorry.
Well, Carrie had her hand up first, so I'll let her go.
Um, Yeah, I think it probably has already been answered, indirectly, but in terms of kids who are neurodivergent or on in any sort of fashion, I imagine that it's kind of a natural, it's kind of like, what do you do instead of putting words in your mouth? How do you approach that with the kids? And in addition to that, like if one kid is going really far and the other one is far, and that's not as old school, and another one's not, is there peer pressure in that? Like, and you're saying like, oh, you've been working on the same math thing for 3 weeks. It's like, well, does that feel kind of nasty for one kid? And then, so I'm interested into like how everyone's moving together. Like that's also something I'm interested in. And they kind of go semi together.
What if, Christy, you take the peer component, and the pacing, and I'll take the neurodivergent. So
Sure.
it's a great question, Carrie, and nice cat, by the way. But so what we do is if a learner has an IEP or a psych eval, then our team will read that upon admission to the school. And I'm special ed certified in the state of Georgia. I think it's expired now, but have expertise in that background. And we will specifically look at the accommodation and come up with our own form that has three categories. One is things guides will do. The second is things our guides won't do, either because of capacity or mission. And then the third is things that we recommend parents do at home, in alignment with what we're reading on the IEP or the psych eval. And then we just show that to the parents in a very transparent way and say, hey, does this work for us? What do we think about this? Does this sound right? And it outlines the supports that are and are not provided, just so everybody's completely clear and transparent. And then that sort of becomes the living ongoing document for that learner that we revisit, especially if it's not going well, and then we'll come back to it and say, oh, these supports are not having the impact we thought they would. Let's add these. So we're sort of taking a continuous improvement approach, to it. We have a number of learners who are neurodivergent. I would say at least 20% of our learners are neurodivergent. And for some, it has worked really well, and it provides the level of flexibility that they want. And for others, they need different kinds of supports that we're not able to provide with the Forest School Online. And we will be totally honest about that. Once learners get in here, typically it goes well and we try and assess that, from the outset. But if it gets here and it's not going well and, and the stuff that we're trying is not working, I'll be the first to say like, hey, your money should be spent elsewhere, and it should be spent on, and we'll make a recommendation for that. And I did that as recently as probably 6 months ago, with a family, and they agreed, and they sort of moved on.
Cool.
Chrissy,
Thank you so much.
yeah,
Yeah, so I know we're a little over time, but if you guys are okay to stay on a few minutes, I know I have a few more minutes. So yeah, with the feedback piece, I think there's a couple components to it. So one thing is that by the time they get to giving feedback like that, those are learners who have been here for 2 years, right? So they have already built that trust with each other, which in the online environment you would think might be harder to build, but it actually happens really fast online for most learners. Because they're in this Zoom and this is how they're communicating. And they really have to give their trust to one another in this type of space, in order to to do their work and collaborate and things like that. So let's say there's a situation where a learner gives a piece of feedback that may be true, but maybe the way they said it rubbed the other person the wrong way, or maybe it was said in a way that wasn't maybe as kind or as helpful as it could have been. That's kind of where we really coach our learners, like, hey, if there's something that somebody does, like we're gonna have like conflict resolution. We're gonna talk through that. Like, hey, I appreciate that feedback that you gave. I think the way that you gave it might have not been helpful for me, and here's how it could have been more helpful for me. And they have that conversation. The guides will also use that as kind of a teachable moment, like, hey, so and so, I hear you saying this. Um, let's try rewording that so that it's kind and constructive, for the other learner. So there's like some coaching pieces in there with the guides as well in terms of how to give feedback. We provide like sentence starters, for learners at the beginning, so some learners don't know how to give feedback. So we kind of coach them through that process as well. But I think the majority of them, once they build that trust, they understand that the other learners or the guide giving them that feedback is really meant to be helpful and constructive for them, and not a place of judgment or anything like that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Clay, did you still have a question?
Yeah. So so in a self-directed environment, how do you mitigate against misinformation and disinformation, or even reinforcing loops? So, as a fifth grader, if I wanna research um, why the Civil War was fought, I can find two different answers to that, right? I probably can find more than two. Um, how do I how do you help students learn how to um, find the the right answers?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I know in the age of AI, it can also be uh, even trickier, right? Where learners are just plugging questions into AI and taking it at face value. So one of the things we kind of coach learners on is how to find accurate sources. If they type something into Google, okay, what kind of websites are we looking for to click on? What ones are we going to avoid? Even then, if we have, 4 great websites, are they all offering, you know, information that aligns with each other? Is there any information that contrasts there? And helping them to look for patterns in what they're finding. And then also, a lot of times, if it's something that has multiple perspectives, like the Civil War, we'll ask them to explore from different perspectives. Or this group of learners will research from this perspective, this group will research from this, and then they share that back with each other and kind of discuss what are the similarities, what are the differences, and things like that. So as much as possible, especially with civilization and world history, we're trying to look at it, from a global perspective, from all the parties involved.
Yeah, the thing I
Okay.
would just add, Clay, is I explicitly teaching bias and extraneous information, um, and so the standardized test that the Forest School Online learners take, there's only one, and yeah, I just dropped it in the chat. It's called the College and Career Readiness Assessment, and it measures quantitative reasoning, analytical thinking, writing persuasiveness, and writing mechanics. And the way it works is our learners are given um, about 7 to 10 different primary source documents, some of which have bias, some of which have extraneous information. And then they're given 3 real world prompts and they have to write. And using the information and evidence that they have in front of them, which is incomplete, they have to make a case and they have to base it on evidence. And they and then they write, and this is the test. And to me, that mirrors the kind of work that we do in the world, because there's very rarely a clear right or wrong answer, and they're having to navigate extraneous information and bias all the time. And so this is a test they take year after year, and inevitably what happens is learners who join our school perform, average or subpar, sub below average on that test. They grow, year after year as their critical thinking skills, evolve. The other way this happens on a daily basis, one of the planning modalities, and I dropped a link to this earlier in the text thread, the chat thread, is we invite learners to evaluate their work at each one of their afternoon signature learning experiences, meaning they are measuring whatever it is they're making, they're measuring it against some standard. Now, it could be a standard they created, could be a standard from a world-class example that they've observed, could be a standard from like a theory or from a piece of research or framework. But they get in the practice of evaluation and self-evaluation themselves. And then, the theory of change is that, like, hey, if we are giving kids practice at being critical thinkers and self-evaluating, then they'll be, and giving the practice at discerning bias and extraneous information, then they're going to, be much more discerning of that, in the long term. That's sort of the theory of change.
Question two is, let's say we send our child to the forest school for a year, and like at the end of the year, we're like, this just isn't working out. Like, what what happens? Like, is he, yeah, just what he's been at the school that's in such a radically different framework. Like, have we screwed him up? Make me feel better about that.
I don't know. I can make you feel better, but I can say that uh, I mean, this happens. Independent schools. This happens for sure, and it's happened at online and in person. And logistically, we send a traditional looking transcript to the receiving school so that they understand here are the courses that they're taking in each one of the core traditional, academic subjects. And then here's some electives they've been exploring, and then here is the point at which they've completed those studies or not. And then, we are willing to hop on the phone as sort of a registrar with any school that's receiving a new child and say, hey, here's our learning program. Here's what's happening. Here's what's being doing. Let me translate this. Here's what Story Arts means. Here's what Civ means. Here's what Quest means. So we do that translation. But broadly speaking, it's interesting when kids go into, and Chrissy, I'm curious your take on this, but when kids go into a teacher-centric environment after having been at Forest for some years, they're usually called leaders actually because they have grown their muscles in independent learning much greater than they did in an environment where they were just being told what to do every day. And the public school teachers or private school teacher-centric teachers are like grateful on the whole. That's kind of the story that I hear most frequently. But Chrissy, I don't know if that resonates with your experience or not. I'm not just selling it. It's like genuinely what I hear.
Yeah, no, we've had parents who have chosen to transition to in-person schools for whatever reason, and um, we've gotten emails a few months later being like, hey, we know it didn't work out with staying at the Forest School online, but we just wanted to thank you because the teachers at our son's school or daughter's school have said that they're so articulate that the way they can express their thoughts in class just completely blows away the other learners in the class. So all those Socratic discussions, those really pay off. Or hey, they're having an easier time now than before they joined the Forest School at like turning papers on time or meeting deadlines because they had to self-direct. So now following a schedule that is required, they're like, oh, this is a piece of cake.
Cool. And then I guess I mean, I heard a little bit, just question 3, and it's my final question, is like, sounds like there's some form of peer-based intervention process for like, if someone's like not showing up or not doing their work or something like that, is there a guide level intervention, beyond that? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if a learner is not showing up in the studio and the guide's like, hey, I haven't seen this person in a like 2 or 3 days, they're emailing to check in, copying the parents and being like, hey, haven't seen you in the studio for 2 days. Just want to check in, make sure everything's okay. Is there anything I can do to support you in getting back online? If they're really having a hard time meeting their goals, again, the guide will kind of talk with them in their check-ins that week and see if they can help them move past it. If it's something where we need to loop the parents in and be like, hey, they're really struggling. This is what they've tried. This is what we've done with them. Let's talk through some other solutions to get them past this. Those are all things that we do as well.
Cool. That's all I got. I think we're set up.
Roz, did we get all your questions? She might be
Um,
to the bedtime, but
yeah. Me. Yes, I'm gonna ask a question. One second. Might be. Yeah. I think my other question was about the socialization with other kids.
you said a question about, is it similar to Clay's where it's just a question about other kids? Is that what you said?
Monitor too because I had the distractions. We talked to the last question. Um, yeah, sorry, just how the parents make sure that they're still interacting with other kids in person.
I
Okay.
don't think I said you. Chrissy, did you catch it?
I think I got it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like, how do parents ensure their kids are still connecting with other kids like in person when they're
Yes.
online? Okay, got it. Yeah, that's a common question. I think there's a lot of ways that could look. I mean, one of them is trying to attend some of our in-person meetups, whether they're in Trilith or somewhere else if you can. Um, a lot of our learners are already involved in kind of like extracurriculars, like a sports team or piano classes or things like that. As somebody who was homeschooled and whose daughter is homeschooled and who works online, I definitely think being intentional about those community pieces is really important online, especially for like mental health. Um, so our learners do, create clubs, like self-directed clubs, and meet with each other at different points outside of like the school meetings. Um, but definitely, I think it's really important to prioritize those extra things, whether it's like a homeschool meetup, one afternoon a week, or some kind of club that they're in. It is really important for them to have those in-person friendships as well.
Chrissy, tell me if I'm wrong. I think there's only one family at Forest Law Online who genuinely keep to themselves. I think
Yeah,
everybody else is like very engaged with various social institutions, from sports to religious organizations
extremely.
to
Hmm.
neighborhoods to whatever, and they're orchestrating those experiences for their kids. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
that is.
Yeah. They're just not expecting the Forest Law Online to meet even the majority of that need, for their kids. And they're fine with that.
Okay.
Any others? Super thoughtful questions, y'all. Really appreciate it. If you have any more as you explore this and other schools, just let us know. I wish you the best in your, school exploration. You guys are very thoughtful about your process, and if we can be an ally to you, let us know.
Cool.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So if we
Thanks
want
for
to
your
apply, we
time.
just apply. Is that the deal? You just fill out a form on the website and call it a day.
That's right. And you can choose to apply for either this current year, in which your application would get considered immediately. And we find it often best to enroll mid-year in the beginning of a new session.
Uh-huh.
There can be exceptions for that, but our next session's start time, Chrissy, is like in a few weeks, is mid-February. Is that right?
February 27th would be the next start date. So applying mid-year, we have rolling admissions throughout the year. Helps the learners really kind of get a feel for things before summer. And then when they come back in August, they're like ready to go. But you can also apply for an August start date for next school year.
And as Clay, Roz, and I, it sounds like all have fourth graders. Like, how does that work? Or how would that potentially work
Yeah,
if,
so we have had
I
a
don't know
couple
Clay
of
and
fourth.
Roz's situation, but yeah.
Yeah, we've had a couple of fourth graders join us. We kind of take it on a family by family basis, but
Yeah,
especially this late in the year where they're essentially a fifth grader, we
yeah.
would just say like, hey, they're not going to make much progress on their. We'd kind of start them as a fifth grader this year, and they would just have
Mhm.
like a jump start towards their fifth grade badge plan, knowing that
Okay,
they're not going to probably get a whole lot, you know, towards their badge plan this year. That
right.
next year will be really their fifth grade year.
Yeah, okay. That's good. That's great to know. Yeah, my thought was that if I did go that route, that it would be a good way to get her going, and then starting school and, the new year would feel like not a big deal. She'd already know the ropes,
Yeah, yeah,
starting in August. Yeah.
definitely.
Right on, Clay. Great to see you. Long
Great
time.
to see you, Tyler.
Um, you know,
Congratulations on your pending nuptials.
thank you very much. Very excited.
Mazel tov.
Thank you very much. And Carrie, great to meet you.
Yeah,
Um,
great to meet you too.
and I think you have both Chrissy's and my email. So if y'all need anything, any questions, just let us know.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
Hey,
Bye.
Tyler,
Yeah.
tell River and Oz and Linus a dad joke for me today, okay? Um,
I definitely will. I
um,
definitely will.
I miss driving carpool with those three.
That's fun,
Um,
man. Yeah, great memories.
those were the days. Those were the
I
days.
know they were not too distant past.
And congratulations on what sounds to be a
Thanks,
fantastic
man.
school.
Thanks.
So
It's fun. We're learning a lot. there's just great people involved. So it's a real blessing for me in a work environment and for the kids.
If you ever
It's
want to
cool.
talk AI, call me. I'm building whole tech
Right on.
stacks out of AI right now.
I'm
like
sure, man.
it's really neat. It's like, so I'm a drug and alcohol interventionist now, and I'm writing AI to help coach my clients through the phases, my clients' families through
Wow.
the phases of addiction for their loved ones. Because the whole disease model is family oriented, and it's extremely powerful stuff. And the cool thing is that like AI is enabling me to ship product once again, like I was 20 years old, because I don't have to like write code like a 20-year-old anymore.
Wow.
So it's really neat.
That's cool.
I think the next, to your point on LinkedIn, I think that and to the point that you mentioned about the dashboard type stuff is, you'll be able to develop your own applications to do that by the end of this year.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is promising.
Check out OpenAI. They just released an operator. It is something that allows you to control, that allows ChatGPT to control a browser and do like work on a browser as a human would. It's not very fast right now, but that's the worst version of that technology that will ever exist. So ostensibly what you could do using computer vision and AI is to say like, hey, listen, AI, go to these 5 different websites and go get me this data and bring it back and like, create this assessment for me. And then like the API stuff is unnecessary.
That's what we need. That's cool. Yeah,
So,
that's cool. That's what we need. That's exactly what we need. Right on. Well, yeah, I'd love to stay in touch, man.
yeah, man. Be good.
All right, you too. Peace. Thanks, Chrissy.
Bye. Nice to meet you, Chris.